Thank you so much for the invitation to present. This is work with Nikhil, Agarwal, and is demand analysis and the latent choice constructs. So I want to link it to what I did in the summer school, in the lecture. Basically, we started with the standard textbook model in which there were a set of consumers that were choosing given a set of prices, right? And in that model, we said, okay, consumers are going to choose the product that matches the future. Okay? And in this case, prices do all the work, and at that price, demand is going to meet supply. Okay, and then we talked about many cases in which there are constraints in the choices. Okay, in school choice in particular, we talked about sometimes you need to be admitted to the school if you want to go to school, right? But these models of constraints of choices can arise in a variety of contexts. For example, there may be information frictions. Consumers may not be aware of the existence of a particular product, and first might have to advertise in order to make consumers aware of those products. Also, there may be supply side rationing, and that is part of what's going on in school choice. For example, in two-sided matching, and in the paper that Nikhil was talking about the National Residence Program, you need to be admitted to the program if you want to go there, right? And you can also think about selective admissions. So there are some hospitals, some nursing homes, in our case, we're going to be talking about the dialysis facilities that would not admit you at a given time. Okay. The common theme of what we're going to be doing in this paper, as opposed to what I did in the summer school, is that in this case, choice sets are unobserved, okay? And they're not given to us by the same mechanism. In the case of school choice, we said, oh, if you know the mechanism, you know the cutoffs, you know which are the schools that you could attend. Okay. Okay, so what we're going to do in this paper is to have a general model of latent choice sets. We're going to have a random utility model of consumer preferences and a general model of the latent choice sets that is going to be consistent with many of the models that you may care about. For example, two-sided matching, informative advertising, fixed sample search. Okay, so we want to test all of those. And we're going to show the identification and estimation using data only on observed matches. Okay, so we're going to be more agnostic about what happens in the process that generates those matches. And we're going to show conditions under which the model is not perfectly identified, and that's going to rely on two sets of instruments. One that is included in preferences and excluded from this model of latent choice sets formation, and one that shifts the choices formation and the excludes from preferences. And I'm going to apply this to the kidney dialysis market in the US. The kidney dialysis in the US at every point in time treats about 3/4 million of patients, and it accounts for 1% of the national expenditure in healthcare. And we think that this approach may be useful in other settings. And just to give you an idea of what are going to be these choices, these shifters in each of the two markets, we're going to have a preference for patients' utilities for facilities that is going to be the distance from the patient's residence to the facility location. And on the side of the facility, we're going to ask, okay, what was your caseload? So how many patients you were treating? Okay, on the day that this patient needed to start the dialysis treatment. Okay, then I'm going to argue then why we take on the exclusion restriction. That's just to give you an idea. All right, so this paper relates to various strands of literature. Of course, we have selected admissions in healthcare. Andrew has a paper on nursing homes, and this thing as a recent paper by Gandhi, Ashwin Gandhi in UCLA. We're going to apply this to the dialysis context. This is related to two-sided matching literature with non-transferable utility. You learn about that in Nikhil's lecture. It's also related to marketing models of consideration sets and brand awareness. For example, there's recent papers by Verghesian, Molinari, and the co-authors. There is a very, very famous paper by Savinsky and Gori, 2008, where we model how we see that a product gets into the consideration sets of a consumer. It's also going to be related to models of complete product availability. For example, Chris Conlon and Julie Mortimer have a paper on, okay, when is that the vending machines get stockouts, okay? This paper is going to build on identification demand without constraints, so the results by Hale and Berry, Hale and Gandhi, and it's also going to be obviously related to the study of the US dialysis in the US. They are that have received a lot of recent attention, particular papers by Tom Waldman, Eliasson, David, and Greco. So these are all the different decisions I'm going to touch. Okay, so let me start by first defining the notation and the primitives of this model. Think about the interval to treat of patient I for treatment J in market T as a function that depends on, I'm going to use this marker so that only people online can see it. So this utility is going to be a function of patient characteristics, WI, some unobserved vector omega I, and it's important that you think of it as a vector and not just as a scalar for a bit, because it doesn't depend on J, but you can think of omega I having at least J components, for example. And that's going to be linearly separable from a function G that again depends on patient characteristics and a shifter of preferences, that is this Yij, okay? So this is Yij is going to be doing a lot of the work, because this is going to be something that shifts consumer preferences for facility J. So we observe everything that is not Greek, and this on the right-hand side on this equation. There are some normalizations that we can always make, because I can always multiply utility by 2, and I can always set the location. So we're going to normalize the location of delta equal to 0, and we're going to normalize the scale by saying that the derivative of G with respect to Y at some point is equal to 1. That's going to set us a scale for a particular for utility. Okay, this is a very general form that nests your preferred BLP formulation if you want. In the BLP formulation that you can see here, you're going to see that, well, Y, here I put it linearly, but you could also think about log of Y, because G is obviously a covariant function. You could have random coefficients that interact observable characteristics of the product with observed characteristics of the patient or the individual setting. And in this case, omega is going to include the random coefficients and the epsilon chances. Okay, so you could, it's pretty general. And in an application, Yij is going to be this. Okay, so now let's flip to the other side. We're going to have a model of choice set formation, and we're going to say that facility J is in I's choice set if this function sigma that depends on same observation characteristics, same vector of unobservable omega, and a new object that is Cij that I didn't talk about in utility because it was excluded from utility. This is going to be the instrument that moves this choice set formation process. Okay. Now you're going to recall. You're going to see that omega I appears on both the choice set formation and the preferences of patients, and that's it because we are going to think that there may be some unobserved, say, match value that a facility, a patient wants to go to a facility that also wants to have the patient set. Okay. And the main assumption that we're going to have is that the Zi's, this vector of Zi's and the vector of Yi's, that is the shifters of on both sides of the market, are going to be independent of this randomness given everything that we observe about the patient. Okay, so the only assumption that we're going to make about this choice set formation process is that this sigma function is non-increasing in the third argument, that is in the instrument, with image between in 0 and 1. So this is saying that essentially I can find a Z that makes this patient admissible in facility J, and I can find another Z that makes this patient not admissible in facility J. Okay? Given that I have this assumption, that is going to imply that there is a cutoff level for Z. Okay? Greater than that level of Z, the patient is not going to be admissible. Below that level of Z, that patient is not going to be admissible. So I can define pi to be the cutoff. And that cutoff is going to depend on the other two things, on patient characteristics and the unobserved characteristics. Okay? So because pi is a function of a random variable, pi itself is going to be a random variable. Okay? So the cutoff, pi, is going to be a random variable, and sigma is going to be 1 only if Z, that we observe, that is an instrument essentially, is below the cutoff, the random cutoff. Okay, so this, as you can see, does not commit to any specific model of choice set formation, but what is important is that your interpretation of Z is going to depend on what is your interpretation of what is the model of choice set formation that you have in mind. Yes?
Is there any assumption or restriction in how the C's of different I's are related? So if we're choosing the same market, maybe the things that are moving my choices are also going to be moving yours.
Say that again, who's me and who's you?
So is Cij related or constrained not to be related to Ci prime J? So basically whatever is moving your choice set can or cannot move my choice set.
And you and I are different facilities or different patients? Are we different I's or are we different J's?
I mean, I'm thinking I was thinking patients, but now I'm interested in both. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, here, what I'm saying is that in my, yeah, of course, we're saying that there is no Zi prime here or Zi J prime here. So yeah, that's something that we are assuming, sorry. But I want to get you the idea of what it means. This is saying that the facility, when I come to when I arrive to the facility is thinking about how busy is on that day. It's not thinking about how busy it was just yesterday, or how busy other facilities in a different area. Those are that's the content of this assumption. Okay.
Assumption one seems kind of controversial, that Z is a measure of busyness, right? I think.
Okay, good. Yes. One thing that you're going to say, look, no, this facility is full because they're good, right? And that means that they're full because people like the facilities that are good, and those facilities are going to be full. So that's exactly right. So for that reason, we want to look at high frequency variation in occupancy, right? So that's going to be that, facilities are going to be always operating at very close to capacity, but there are going to be some weeks in which some of the patients die, some of the patients moved, some of the patients got transplanted. Those weeks we're going to see the occupancy of that facility dip. Is that the case that then that facility is going to go after, say, less desirable patients? But that's exactly right. Yes, we need to be very careful for that. Yes. Excellent. Yeah. So that's why we're going to find Zi as excess occupancy in, it's not that how many patients you have, it's relative to a particular trend that we try to estimate that has low frequency, and we're going to see deviations relative to that high frequency variation. Yes.
So at a given facility, two different people have different Z's?
At the same facility, on the same day, two individuals are going to have exactly the same Z. But if I come...
I thought the other papers on this said that wasn't the case.
Sorry, say it again?
I thought the other papers I've seen on this said that isn't the case.
In which case? Tell me more, because...
Some of them are, in Medicare and some of them aren't.
No, great, yes. So that is exactly right. They're going to have exactly the same Z, that is, they're going to have exactly the same occupancy. One patient is going to have a higher pi because either pi means that YI is your medical.
So why is Z indexed by I as well as J?
So, okay, so again, so ZI is how busy the facility is today.
ZJ, I thought J was the
ZIJ is how busy is the facility on the day that patient I arrives. Okay?
So that, it's really just indexed by T.
It's really indexed by, oh, well, T is market in our case, so sorry, yeah.
But it's basically indexed by time, and the Medicare thing that you're thinking about is in double.
It's just, it's not, I understand, but one side has a T, the other side doesn't have a T. And
Oh, yeah,
what's going on?
Yeah, but T, yeah, okay, good. T is just a bad notation. T is market, it's a
But I should understand,
Yeah.
it should be, I should think of it as ZJT.
Yes.
Yes, CHT, that in that sense, yes. If we interpret T as day, yes. And pi I is going to contain, oh yeah, you have Medicare, or for some reason we like you and we want you in our city. Yes.
And the standing assumption is that patients don't have any preferences over the expectations of C, for example.
Right. So the standard assumption is that patients may have a preference for the expectation of C, meaning that it's the low frequency variation of Z, but not of the high frequency variation of Z. So you care about how busy this facility is going to be for the next year that you're going to undergo treatment, not the week that you needed to start your treatment.
But, you
So,
know,
I'm not
the
seeing
week
that.
I need, just following up on that.
Yeah.
I might wait and go, I wait till the facility that I like
Yeah.
is free
Yeah.
and go there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so then the.
Yes, that's something that we look at, and we see some churning, but way less than what you would think about. So it's not the case.
It's that, you know, I have a problem with my kidney.
Yeah.
It's not dire yet. At some point, I'm gonna need dialysis.
No.
Can't wait.
You can't
Can't
wait.
wait, is that
You
right?
can't wait.
I mean,
Yeah.
if your
Okay.
doctor says that.
Yeah. This is yeah. Once you start, you need it right away. Yeah.
But W, or the set of things that are included in W, will have some J elements also. Right, because if I have expectations over Z, J,
Yeah.
then like it should be in there somewhere.
Yes. So notice that sigma is indexed by J. So I could basically any interact. What your model is one in which sigma is not indexed by J, but I have some characteristics of J that I can interact. So yeah, we don't need that. But yes, you could parameterize it that way. In fact, we're going to parameterize it that way. Yes. Yeah, great questions. Any other questions? Okay, good. So that's all that I have for the model. So now let's think about how these two instruments can help me identify this model. Okay. So I'm going to talk about identifying a joint distribution of everything that is observed, then about identification of this function G that I left very flexible. Okay, so wrapping up the collapsing the model, I have a two-equation model. One is for the utility of individuals, one is for the choice formation process. Suppose that I can condition on everything that is observed, condition on the subgroup T that is market, so to make it easier. So I'm going to have the function V, that is a utility of the individual i's, just given by some U minus Gj of the instrument Y. And sigma is just 1 if pi is greater than 0. So everything that is random here are the u's and the pi's, that's random. Okay, so I want to identify this joint distribution given that I see the market shares of each of the vector market shares of all the facilities given the two vectors of preference and choice set shifters. Yes.
G is known.
G is something that I'm going to be not known at this point. Not known at this point. So now it's not known. I'm going to get after it. But I'm going to, just for illustrative purposes, when I switch the slide, I'm going to ask you to believe me that it's known. And then I'm going to show you how I find that, just because, for presentation purposes. But J is not known, G is not known at this point. Now it's going to be known. Okay, good. So now G is going to be known, and suppose that I have only one facility, okay? Suppose I have only one facility, and I want to think about the market share of the outside good. That this patient didn't go to any of the facilities, he got home dialysis. Okay? Okay, in order for a patient to go to home dialysis, it has to be that either this patient doesn't like this facility or this facility doesn't like this patient. Okay, so it's an OR, it's an OR operator. That means that either the U has to be below G, that is over here, so that is all this area, or that the pi, that is the profitability shock, has to be below Z. So that is going to be this area. Okay, so all the red area is going to be the probability that a patient chooses the outside option. I can now go ahead and think about what would happen if I look at a patient, a patient that lives a little bit farther away. If this patient lives further away, well, the probability that this patient goes to the outside option increases. By how much? By the difference between this area to the left and the red area, that is the sum of the blue and yellow areas, essentially. That the increase in the market share of the outside option are all the patients that are in these two sets. And now I can basically get at this set, at the market share of this set, by doing the same process, but now shifting everything to G, shifting the G out. By subtracting that two, I'm going to get the mass of patients in this yellow square, essentially. And I can make this square as small, as big as I want. It doesn't have to be a square, really. So I can identify all the probabilities in any of these sets. Okay, so this is what happened if I had only one facility. Now, what happens if I have more than one facility? Well, it has to be that a patient doesn't like facility one, or the facility one doesn't like the patient, and if the patient doesn't like facility two, or the facility doesn't like the patient, and so we have all these and or operators, okay? So we need to think about how to deal with those. Okay, so what we're going to have here is that actually, if you write down what this integral is going to look like, it's going to basically look like a bunch of these L-shaped sets that I showed you here, but now one for each dimension, essentially. So I can reconstruct this, and here what I'm doing is I'm just collapsing one dimension of the first facility. I'm just collapsing it in one axis. So this is what we found. This is the set of G that was consistent with the pink, with the yellow square here. That's why this is yellow. But now I can reiterate the process, and I can get another blue box now for the two facilities, and I can keep doing that for any number of facilities that I want. So it's like a way of taking some derivatives and worrying about the sign. Okay, so this gives results to the first lemma that says under assumptions 1 and 2, if G is known, then I can identify the distribution of U and pi on the support of the data on G and Z. Okay, so I can identify the density of the support. So this requires only local variation in the instruments. So I'm not taking anything to infinity. Although if I want to see the density of extreme values, I need to take those instruments to infinity, and it requires instruments on both sides. Okay. Notice that this approach doesn't rely on any particular model of choice information. You just need these instruments to do the work for you, but and it allows for some correlation between the U's and pi's. Because I'm not assuming anything particular about your class. So now let's talk about G. Okay, so I'm going to make some, I'm not going to go in details on this, but I'm going to make some connected substitutes kind of assumption between how good substitute in terms of because they are verifiable in the market share. Okay. So this is if you change the distance of one facility, some other facility is going to pick up the demand lost by the facility for which you increase the distance. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is to say, okay, suppose that I construct the inclusive value of a consumer before it knows its utility. Okay, and the only thing that it knows is its vector of distances, vector of distances. Okay, and here I'm conditioning a particular value of z. That's why I'm not even writing z here. So that's the inclusive value. Inclusive value given a vector of distances. I can differentiate this with respect to G, and I'm going to get the market share of facility J. Why is this? Well, because if I move G by 1, this is only relevant in the case where facility J is the facility that I'm going to, and that is if that happens, the market share. And that's a version of Roy's identity. That implies that now we can take the derivative of the market share of good J with respect to K, distance of good K, and that's going to give me a cross partial of the value function times the derivative of G, just by the chain rule. This is a derivative of G, K, because I took the derivative with respect to Yik. That means that I can take two derivatives, two cross derivatives, the derivative of market share of good J with respect to K, and the derivative of market share of good K with respect to J, and that's going to basically cancel out the cross partial and give me a ratio of derivatives. Then I can integrate back G's. So that is how I identify G. Now the key thing here is that I'm not interpreting that this is necessarily evidence of here we could have these cross partials to be different than 1, and I'm not going to be claiming that this model has constraints. All the constraints are coming through the choice set shifters. Okay, so I'm not learning constraints from demand. This is only. Okay, so now let me tell you a little bit how we estimate this model. Of course, we have our dear Gibbs sampler that I spent a good chunk of my lecture speaking about, because it's going to come up handy here. We are going to parameterize V as a linear function that's going to depend on facility fixed effect, okay, a bunch of patient characteristics, and then we are going to have pi that is also a function of facility fixed effects and patient characteristics. We're going to have an instrument, and we're going to have some errors, and we're going to allow for correlation between the errors, and we're also going to allow for a fixed effect, like a random effect for an individual that prefers the inside option versus outside option. It's like a nest. Okay? And now we're going to approximate the maximum likelihood using MLE, because as I was telling you, all these sets that we're integrating density over are sets that we know the inequalities that imply them, so we can apply the Gibbs sampler using the same thing that I talked to you about in the lecture. Okay, so we're applying that method all over again. Okay, so let me spend a couple of minutes telling you about the kidney dialysis in the US. These are patients that find out that they have kidney failure, they were sick, they need dialysis right away, until they either get a transplant, or very few of these people recover, and otherwise you need either to get dialysis for the rest of your life or get a transplant. Medicare provides near universal coverage. It costs the taxpayer about $50 billion per year, and this is about 7% of the Medicare spending. We're going to focus mainly on hemodialysis. That is about 90% of dialysis patients. There are a type of peritoneal dialysis, are a type of approaches to this, but hemodialysis is the most common one. And this is an outpatient procedure, and facilities are typically not associated with any hospital, and the market is kind of concentrated. You have a couple of very big players, Fresenius and DaVita, for example, are the two that you might hear about. Yes, so
I don't know the context incredibly well, but it seems like if this seems a very onerous procedure that you kind of have to be there for a while.
yes.
Is there any worry that Y is being chosen? Okay, so you pick your place and you relocate closer by because you know you have to go there quite a bit.
Oh, I see. Right? Yeah, that would be. I mean, okay, good. You're good. We're thinking about this is people that need dialysis right away. It may be that in the long run, there are these considerations that are important. And we're only using people the first time that they arrive. All this is going to be very relevant if you want to take this and see, okay, what happens after? What happens after 1 year down the road that they decide to switch at this essential range, right? Around this. Yes. Yes, and it's a very arduous process. These people have to be between 2 or 3 times a week for 4 hours at a time. So this is something that essentially is impacting the
The
life.
median person goes only one study in their lifetime and does not change.
Does not change.
Does not change the median person.
Okay.
The medium person, yeah.
But it is sort of interesting what fraction do change.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We
You
have-
know, related to that, there's a question, I didn't, is there any sense of market constraints and not the capacity constraints? How are you gonna deal with
Oh, market, what do you mean by market?
capacity? And I only have 5. I
Yeah,
only
okay,
need 10.
perfect. Yeah, we are thinking that most of our constraints and choices are coming through capacity constraints. But it's not going to be like we want to say, so, okay, you have 2 stations that are free for some time. It's not that you're going to say yes to the next 2 patients that come. You may be selected. Why you may be selected? Because if I have only two stations, I want to wait for really good patients to take those
And that's taken into
and
account.
that's taken into account because we're going to have your admission policy is not deterministic as a function of Z. It's going to be a probability that you admit or not the patient, and that probability depends on observed characteristic of the patient. Yes.
So I think Gandhi's paper says something like it can also come from complexity of the cost function.
Yes. Exactly.
Is it possible to tell those 2 stories?
No, complexity of the cost function is a reason why you use this strategy. Right?
Even if you still have basically variance.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. There was another question. All right. Good. Okay, so we have data on the US RDS system, and this is very comprehensive data on new patient admissions. Medicare, because this is mostly covered by Medicare, they collect information on basically all patients, and we have patient zip code, we have comorbidities, we have demographics, and we have the identity of the primary insurer. Because Medicare sometimes is a secondary insurer. If any of us probably get sick, our university is going to be the primary.
Can I just ask,
Yeah.
is there any distinction now that, I mean, the way you're gonna get a choice set is by distance. I can put distance in the utility function.
Distance is in the utility function. What is not in the utility function is how busy was the facility the day that I needed dialysis. Distance is going to be the main shifter of the utility function.
Okay.
Yes. And the facilities are going to know the locations, and we're going to know the caseload. We're going to see how many patients are treated at any point in time. Now, here is a map of California. We have lines from where the patient lives, from the patient zip code to each facility. What I want to take from this graph is there are no thick lines, meaning that most patients travel very little, okay? You have some long lines. This is essentially a patient that lives in a zip code that goes to this facility, but this is the center of a zip code, it's a mountain, so most likely this patient lives in an urban area that is close to the limit of this zip code, because we are mapping to the centroids of zip code. Okay. Okay, so the number of stations at a facility is a very good predictor of how many patients this facility is treated. I mean, you can get a better predictor, but you're going to see some high frequency variation in that measure. And the key thing is that when you regress where there is a new patient coming to this facility on a day that this facility is above its trend of occupancy, you're going to see that the facilities are less likely to get a new patient when they have more, when they have excess occupancy. Okay, sorry, this is the number that I want to say. And they are more likely, the number of days until the next patient is bigger when the facilities are busier. Okay, it's also the case that individuals that come to the market a day that their local area is busier tend to travel farther. And this is what this is telling me. I'm not going to go through all the estimation results, but let me give you the results. So what you see is that most of the facilities are admit the patients. So what I have here is a histogram of facilities. And essentially what we have is each facility is, we compute what is the probability that you are going to admit any patient that arrive in your area. Okay, so most facilities are going to basically be open for business, but you see some long tail of facilities that are typically very busy, that do not admit anyone. Okay, and some facilities that are that typically are free, but for some patients they are closed, essentially. A one standard deviation in occupancy in this measure of excess occupancy reduces admission probability by 2.28%. Okay, so let me tell you one more thing about the results of the paper. Suppose that you estimated a model that you forget about capacity constraints. You just think that every facility is open for every individual. What you're going to see is that you're going to overestimate the relationship between log market share and mean utility. So you're going to think that facilities that admit a lot of people are facilities that people like a lot. Okay, because if a lot of people are choosing them, well, that must be that they are very good. But what we find with our method is that in fact, the relationship is not that, it's a little bit weaker. It's still positive, but it's a little bit weaker. Okay, capacity constraints are important for some patients. 73% of patients get treated at the top choice facility, so that's not bad. But 5.9% of them do not get treated at any of the top 5 facilities. And for those, the utility falls by an equivalent of 3/4 of a mile. Okay, so these patients are, and these are, you need to be there 3 times a week for 4 hours. So that's not that's something. Of course, we're going to be overestimating the utility of facilities that are typically busy. So for facilities that have a low probability of admission, you get a bigger overestimation of demand, of mean utility. Okay, so let me conclude. We have come with a unified approach for identification in several modes of choice with constraints. Our model can fit modes of supply-side rationing, information frictions, and it's based on instruments that are excluded from one and the other side of the market. These frictions are common in this rationing, may be common in a number of markets, and in particular, they are affecting the allocations in the dialysis industry. One thing that we are leaving for future work is, okay, once you have our model that predicts admissions, these constraints, you can build a structural model using that as an input. Okay, so that is a policy function of a facility saying, oh, we admit a patient. Well, it might be a structural model that you can fit, exploiting that policy function. This is straightforward in two-sided matching. So if you think about two-sided matching, well, the policy function tells you, okay, how does the facility like the individual? So that's the link is direct there. But in other contexts like the dialysis, you might want to have a more complicated model that also thinks about endogenous decisions such as pricing, quality decision, like what is how, or in the case of dialysis, quality, how many nurses do I want to hire? So that's something that we learn for future work. Okay. Any questions? Yes.
So the Chow-Fu estimated this equilibrium model of college admissions where you don't see the application sets that
Right.
choose. So she essentially integrated out and estimated it by simulated maximum likelihood. And could you just comment? So if you make parametric assumptions, she has a proof of identification. How would her approach kind of compare with what you're doing here?
No, I agree. So in a way, So I have to see exactly. I don't want to say something that is right. But I think that, yeah, if you make I think that there are some difference in terms of how much you allow, how much correlation you allow between the shocks in one side and the other shocks. I'm not exactly sure. I don't want to give you a exact, I don't want to be wrong, essentially. But one thing I want to tell you, you could estimate this if you find it in your, if you could, what we're also doing is some parametric assumptions at the time of estimation, right? We have a non-parametric identification proof, but at the end of the day, we're doing MLE.
Yeah.
And we are approximating it instead of by simulation, by different way of simulating, whether using sample or not simulation machine likelihood. But I want to be sure, let me come back to you on the exact difference of the model. Yeah.
John, you just said in which paper has the proof of non-parametric identification? What I'm not aware of.
Yeah, I think she made parametric assumptions, so her appendix is, based on a parametric assumption, like normality of the shocks, for instance. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, lunch. Now it's time for lunch.
Okay.